Welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees. My next guest was the mayor of a small little town you might have heard of called Cooperstown. He's also authored a number of baseball books and currently contributes to the blog for the Society of American Baseball Research Baseball Card Committee, Jeff Katz. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Now, do I call you Jeff or Mr. Mayor?
I prefer His Honor, but Jeff's fine.
All right, His Honor, but we'll call you Jeff for the rest of the way. So, of course, I wanted to have you on. Of course, you authored a couple of baseball books. You're a sports writer. You currently contribute to the Society of American Baseball Research Baseball Card Committee. And, oh, yeah, you were mayor of this town called Cooperstown, which has something to do with baseball. But I just wanted to get into your background. So you're originally from Brooklyn, correct?
Yeah, I was born in Canarsie and lived there till I was a little over 9. Then, like a lot of people in the early 70s, we moved to Long Island, was there till the end of that decade, and then off to college and eventually off to Chicago for a lot of years. And then from Chicago, we moved to Cooperstown about 18 years ago and started a completely different type of living.
Gotcha. And, at a young age, were you like into like baseball cards initially? Is that just something you picked up later on?
I mean, I was always into sports. I was an inconsistent athlete, but as a spectator, I don't know, like I was born in 62. So like I had an uncle who was a big New York Giants fan. Most of the rest of my family were Dodger fans, who became Met fans. So I was kind of always surrounded by baseball fans. But, think also by the time I was 7, you had the 69-70 Knicks, you had Namath, you had the Mets in 69. It was really a great time to follow all New York sports. So I would say over the years, baseball really started to dominate. But until I was probably about 20, I think all the sports kind of obsessed me equally.
But was there any like one team, I guess, in terms of baseball that you really followed? Or was this kind of like, you're this, more of a National League person just because, the people around you?
No, I was a huge Met fan until they traded Seaver. And when they traded Seaver, I realized that I liked Seaver a lot more than I liked the Mets. And it kind of ended my following the Mets. And it kind of changed the whole way I looked at baseball. Instead of being like a team-based rooter, I just loved the game, which kind of protects me from any of those like real miserable team fan, like Yankee fans 3 days ago were all ready to write off the whole year, right? Like I don't have that. I also don't have the highs when your team wins the championship, but it kind of gives me better peace of mind. And actually kind of being player centric instead of team centric is what led to certainly split season about the 81 strike.
And again, is that people can follow you on Twitter, obviously at split season 1981.
Right.
And of course, check out your website, Jeff-Katz, where the books are available and plus some other information about you. So just quickly before, obviously you said you spent some time in Chicago. What made you gravitate towards Cooperstown as your new home?
So I always loved Cooperstown. I visited here first in the summer of 73. And then in college, I went to Binghamton. So Binghamton's about an hour and a half from Cooperstown. So I would come at least once a year. Then I went back I was living in Staten Island at the time. Went to Staten Island, would visit once a year. My wife's family's from Schenectady. So when we would come back to visit from Chicago, I'd come down. And I was in finance. I was an options trader. So starting in like the mid 90s, we really thought about getting a house here and maybe being in both places. But by the time we bought this house in early 03, we were all ready to kind of move to a quieter, simpler type of place. And then, of course, I got involved in politics and mayor and made it a lot less simple for me. But we always had in mind the idea of kind of raising our kids in a small village where they could walk to their friends, kind of like, in a weird sense, like how I grew up in Canarsie, where, every neighborhood was like a small village itself. You had no problem like walking to the candy store, walking to friends. And, in the Chicago suburbs, no one's walking anywhere. Everyone needs a lift. So we always had it in mind to come here, and we did, and it turned out to be even better than we thought it would be.
So how do you kind of like transition to like, again, being an option trader and then, around early 2000s, start doing some sports writing, but then get into politics? Like how did that take place?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird path, but kind of just not a path that I was like dedicated to. So I always liked writing. Um, so just as like, on my own free time, I would write every once in a while. And we were still like in Chicago, and I had written just for myself, like a short story about like a what if history, what if Koufax had had a revolutionary surgery and fulfilled a whole career, which I think I end with him pitching against the Yankees in 77,
Hmm.
maybe in the World Series. So think about it. He would have been 41, conceivable. I mean, conceivable. Not as like Koufax, the starting pitcher, superstar, but, a pitcher. So I wrote that. I liked that. I ended up submitting it to a guy who was putting together a book like that, kind of what if histories. It's called Play It Again. And it was a small publisher. I forget who put it out. But anyone who reviewed it was like, that Jeff Katz story is the best, because it was like really kind of like a historical fiction. It wasn't like, yeah, if McCovey had hit the ball 2 feet higher over Richardson's head, the Giants would have won. All right, that's interesting, but it's not a story. It's just a thing. So the feedback I got on that made me want to write more. And around 2005, I think, I pretty much stopped trading. I was still trading from Cooperstown. Um, my wife was editor of a local newspaper, and I was home with the kids, but they were all in school. So I'm like, I'm going to write a book. Why not? I've read a lot of baseball books. I can write a baseball book. And the Hall of Fame library is, a 6-minute walk from my house. So, I have the biggest library in the world to do that. And interestingly, at the time, Clete Boyer was here always. Like every year he was here, like from spring to fall. He had a restaurant down the block. The first book's about the Kansas City A's and the Yankees in the 50s, and that kind of either evil relationship if you hate the Yankees, or incredibly clever relationship if you love the Yankees. So I wrote a book and I got published, and it got a little press. It got a little mention in the New York Post. Got to do some presentations on it, and it made me want to write another book. And Split Season became the next book, which really got a lot of national attention. It didn't hurt that I was by then mayor of Cooperstown.
Probably a lot of younger Yankee fans don't realize that, yes, before they used to have these dealings where it seems like the Yankees would get one-sided deals from the A's and got players such as Roger Maris, and then there was buying back contracts such as Clete Boyer and Ralph Terry and so forth.
And it was a crazy situation. Like the more I looked into it, the weirder it was. And you'd have situations where like I think it was Gil McDougall. I think we had letters back and forth. And I'm like, do you remember anything about this period? Anything that seemed odd? He said, no, nothing seemed strange. Like I remember Casey would say to us, who do you guys want from the A's? But that's it. I'm like, okay, that's a tell. Or when the A's got Maris from Cleveland, like Yogi in the clubhouse was like, we got Maris. Like they didn't. The A's did.
Yeah.
And there were always kind of weird things. They would send Ralph Terry to Kansas City where he pitched well, but then they'd call him back. So the book, I think, kind of fleshed out a bit of a story that everyone who follows this stuff had an idea of. But talking to some of the players and having their kind of, in a sense, revealing information that they didn't think was revealing made it that much better. But ultimately, all of them were like, "I'm just glad I got back on the Yankees." They were like, "Good for me."
As mayor of Cooperstown, I mean, shame on me. I still haven't gotten an update yet, but just, maybe for people who haven't gotten there, like, what is it like during like Hall of Fame induction, that week of period? Like, how does the town just come alive?
So induction's the greatest. It kind of starts Friday late afternoon and ends Monday midday. And by Friday, we used to do this, and we still do it. We'll close Main Street to cars and traffic. So it really becomes like the best baseball block party ever. And by Friday night, they were like, it's not just the Hall of Famers who are here, who are, if you see them, it's in usually very controlled situations. They're doing autograph signings or they're at Hall of Fame parties, which, you know, I got to go to for a lot of years. Not anymore, but that was a lot of fun. But it's the other people kind of who are here doing signings, who are here as friends or family of the Hall of Famers. Like I was on Main Street signing books one year, and the guy with me was Mike Silverman, who writes, I forget which Boston paper, and he just had a book about Pedro come out. It was the year Pedro got inducted. And Ramon Martinez walked by and like stopped to talk to us. I'm like, for a baseball fan, that's the best. Like running into Ed Kranepool and Ron Swoboda on the street corner. And I always had a great opening line. Hey, I'm Mayor of Cooperstown. But I think the most fun day is the Saturday before induction, because Main Street is packed. There are food vendors and souvenir vendors and autograph signings all up and down the street. So many people are wearing jerseys of all different kinds. You know, the best year was like when Ricky got in, and someone had that like Angels in the Outfield Angels vest. If you remember that, with the little wing coming out of the A. Like, I totally forgot those existed. But, you know, baseball fans, like, they come and they've got their stuff and they're dressed for it. And it's a blast. It is hard to come to in a normal year because hotels are hard to find. It's still a small village of 1,800 people. It's not like there's 100 hotels around, but it's worth it.
And as quickly as mayor, I guess, you know, in your 6 years that he's serving, I mean, what was this, maybe you feel your greatest achievement or the best thing you've done for the town?
So there was a lot of things that got done. I would say overall, in a general thing, was kind of using the power of the Cooperstown name to get grants and funding to fix a lot of Cooperstown problems. Probably the marquee project was in my last year. We got $5 million to do renovations at Doubleday Field, which have started to happen, and it really looks beautiful while still looking like old Doubleday Field. So probably from a PR point of view, the renovations of Doubleday Field were the best, but there's a lot of kind of like inside nuts and bolts stuff that would be too boring to get into, but just kind of like using the Cooperstown name to help Cooperstown in a way that really wasn't done before, like to help Cooperstown residents. I mean, the businesses are helped by the Hall of Fame and other tourist attractions, but helping the residents was kind of my goal, and I accomplished a lot.
And again, while you were mayor, that you had the opportunity to write your second book, Split Season 1981, Fernando Mania, the Bronx Zoo, and then the strike that saved baseball. So what was your interest of, you know, just telling the story?
So I was always fascinated by that strike. Unlike a lot of strikes, unlike every strike, it interrupted the season. It didn't like delay the start or end it early. The season started, it was gone, and then it came back. I was 18, almost 19. So for me, that was like a much more pivotal strike in my life than 94, when I was much older and had kids. Like, I had other things on my mind. And I felt that 1981 was kind of, it had been lost in the shuffle, particularly because of 1994. And I also think, because I do align with the players more, one of the things I think is always the most ridiculous thing for a fan to say is, the players are greedy, I'm with the owners. Like, who is more wealthy and more interested in the bottom line and dollars than owners? I mean, that's indisputable, right? So I wanted to tell a story that explained why free agency was important. And the 1981 strike was really a fight to save free agency, which was new. You know, it had only started like 4 or 5 years before then. And it was fun to explore. You know, most of the new information was in the negotiating part of that story, which I find fascinating. The baseball story is also a great story. It's the last Yankee-Dodger World Series. It's Fernando's year. Rose breaks the NL hit record that year. There's a lot of good stuff on the field. And I found it like an incredibly interesting season that had kind of been lost in time. And it was fun to write and fun to talk to some of the guys involved in it.
But I was just looking, reading into it a little bit. I didn't realize that there was it was really technically the first time there was a divisional series play,
Right.
which didn't
Right.
really come till 95. But because what they did is before the strikes started, they had, the divisional winner for that. And then the division winner from the second half of the season played in that first
Right.
round, which I had no idea that even happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that certain owners, including Bud Selig, who owned the Brewers at the time, had wanted an extra level of playoffs, and this was a way to get it in because they had to figure out how to resume the season. I mean, they legitimately were worried that if you just resume it as is, there are certain teams that are really out of it, and why would anyone come back? The reality is it wasn't that great on the field because, like, the AL East particularly, I forget, but like 5 of the 7 teams were like within 3 games of each other going into last week had they played just a full season. But I think Selig always had it in his mind to get back to that. I think the fact that the wild card started when he was commissioner is not an accident. But it was a strange situation because, and I think this is legitimately true and related to the Yankees. Had the Yankees not won the first half, and had the Dodgers not won the first half, I think Tony La Russa at the time said we wouldn't even be talking about split seasons. Right? The fact that they could guarantee the Yankees and Dodgers would already be in the playoffs meant a lot. The fact that they paired up in the World Series was amazing too, but it was not the most well thought out plan by the owners, and there were a lot of kind of flaws in that, including the Reds had the best record in Major League Baseball and didn't make the playoffs at all, and the Cardinals had the best record in the NL East and didn't make the playoffs because their combined record didn't matter. So there were people in the discussion, people in the ownership area, because it was completely an ownership decision. There were people who pointed this out, including the president of the Reds, who maybe had a bad feeling, but he's like, listen, if we're a half a game out in the first half and a half a game out of a different team in the second half, we're screwed. And that's exactly what happened to them. And that was like the last year of the Big Red Machine in most ways. I mean, Rose was gone and Morgan was gone, but Bench was there. Seaver was still there. Seaver had a great year in 81. Foster was having great years still. And then after that, the Reds just, fell off a cliff for a few years. There's a lot of things I liked bringing out in the book. One was how great before Pete Rose became so tarnished, it's almost impossible to think about. He was the face of baseball. I mean, everyone loved Pete Rose, The other thing I wanted to bring out was like how terrible Steinbrenner was for so long. And I'm not talking like championships, but I'm talking about like human being. And, the fact that, they came back in the 90s when he was suspended again, and then he was kind of older and, some of that harsh edge had worn down. But how he behaved in the 70s and 80s was insane. And to kind of like relive that, it's like, because by now people are like, oh, if only George was alive, he'd never put up with this. Like, he fired Gene Michael in September when they were already headed for the playoffs. I mean, he had fired Dick Hauser after Dick Hauser had the best record in the AL in 1980. I mean, was he a great owner? I guess. I mean, they won championships, but there was so much damage that was done to that team in a way that really doesn't get done anymore, right? So like they win the pennant in 81. He screwed over Reggie like all year psychologically, and then he let Reggie go. Reggie had a great year in 82. You're too young to remember this, but they used to just sign whoever was perceived as the best free agent. it didn't really matter, right? So in 82, they have Winfield already. They have a good team. They just were the pennant winners. But like they signed Ken Griffey Sr. and they signed Dave Collins. And George decides, because the best free agents are those guys, that now they're going to be a speed team.
Mm.
And the team was terrible. I mean, like his kind of inconsistency of approach. I'm going to spend money. I'm going to, if we have 8 outfielders and Steve Kemp is the number 1 free agent, I'm signing Steve Kemp.
Mm.
And then he'd fire a manager. Like, I mean, I was just looking through old scorecards. I was at the game in Chicago, or whatever it was, like the 7th game of the year in 85, and he fired Yogi right after that. Like, I think Yogi was right not to go back for 30 years. I mean, Yogi meant a lot more to the history of that organization than George Steinbrenner to me. So kind of recapturing what a nut George Steinbrenner was kind of fun. I mean, I had a good time kind of exploring that again.
Yeah, I mean, not only that with the Yogi situation, but he really abused Dave Winfield, which is because I mean he had him for like 10 years, but like it was almost, it would have been a shame because really I think Winfield would have liked to go into the Hall of Fame just as a typical Yankee, but it was like,
oh, I'm sure, yeah.
But you had that hurt relationships, and then Winfield kind of bounced around in the 90s. But yeah,
right.
But yeah, I would say Winfield and the Yogi situation. I mean, it was good that they finally repaired in '98. But that was probably Steinbrenner's 2 worst marks. So so just quickly go and get into the blog again. Now you into the baseball cards again for the Society of American Baseball Research. In terms of baseball cards, now you hear these whisperings like lately. Now the industry's starting to come back. I know it took a dip. I had a lot of cards. I had a Dave Winfield rookie card. I had Reddy Jackson rookie card.
Right.
The value went down. Now it seems like maybe that market's coming back. Like, where's the wind blowing in that industry?
It seems that kind of everything is going up. And part of it, I think there's a lot of different reasons. One is a lot of people were working from home and were like looking at their old cards again. Like I see this on Twitter. People are like, oh, I was 30 cards away from the 1975 set. I'm going to finish that. And people would connect that way. I don't know what percentage, the COVID relief bills passed, under the last president and the current president were all good and necessary. But not everyone needed that money. And all of a sudden people had like an extra $1,400. They're like, I'm buying cards. The kind of growth of new product, like, I mean, the idea that Giannis rookie cards could be tens of thousands of dollars already, if not more, depending on like rarity and autograph and stuff, like, is crazy. So there's all these, and then you have like the Wall Street dudes get involved. Now they're like seeing opportunities to flip stuff, bid stuff up. But it's filtered down through everything. Like I've been working on some old football sets lately. Like even cards that I thought I could have gotten for like $30 a few months ago are now like $50. Not the end of the world, but percentage wise, that's a big difference. I think like what happened when you were a kid, right, where the market kind of imploded, is likely to happen here because there are collectors and there are investors. And people who collect cards because they like collecting cards, which I am one of them, are always happy when their collections go up, but also are not unhappy when the price goes down because now they can buy more cards. So, I mean, I don't see... I was talking to a local card store owner in Cooperstown when the Knicks got Derrick Rose, and all of a sudden Derrick Rose cards are screaming. I'm like, yeah, that made sense 13 years ago, maybe. But Derrick Rose, his career story is basically told. Like, who's chasing Derrick Rose now, right? So, I mean, I do think the market in cards is bound to correct. And healthy is an interesting thing, right? You see stories of people standing online outside of Target to wait for the card guy to deliver stuff. I don't know if that's healthy. This is the first year in my life I haven't bought a pack of cards yet. I mean, I'll buy the set when the year finishes up, but like that's not healthy to me. Healthy is like some guy says, I need a bunch of cards from 1973 and someone else says, oh, I got them, I'll trade you for them, or, you know, I don't need to exact top dollar. I mean, you know, since it's the difference between a hobby and a business, and it's always been a mix of that. I'm having a good time with it, but the rise in prices also makes me wonder what to do next. Like, I just finished a 1964 top set, and like a Clemente card I thought I could get for $40, I ended up paying 80 for. It's, again, not the end of the world. I'm not buying Mantle rookie cards, but you know, I don't want to get caught in some kind of, you know, upswing where all of a sudden I'm kind of compelled as a collector to pay way more for something than I want to. So I think it's a mixed bag, but there's certainly a lot of money being made in cards right now. And I guess in that sense, it's healthy because people are interested.
Yeah, I haven't looked at my set in eons just because,
Yeah.
you know, I would never sell it because I just like to collect it. But
Yeah,
just
yeah.
as we wrap it up, I guess, is there like maybe a favorite, well, like favorite type of card, like whether it's a year, like a Topps or Bowman's like that? And then individually, is there like one card is like your pride possession?
I don't know if I have anything that's like a pride possession. I mean, I've got a lot of cards of all sports and everything. Certainly, like all of us, the sets that I collected the most as a kid are my favorites. So I would say the sets from like 1970 to 76 or 7 in all sports are kind of my favorites. They're like my old friends. Like, I haven't bought them, you know, some of them I had to kind of fill in to finish the sets, but most of them were like bought in packs. I was talking to someone recently and they were asking like what, you know, my cost was for my 1973 baseball cards. I'm like, I don't know, packs are a dime, I think. So it's a penny a card. It's not like I spent $300 for a Mike Schmidt rookie. I bought a pack of cards and I bought a lot of packs. So I don't have like a set that's like my number one or a card that's my number one, but that period, not only I was buying a lot of cards that were out then, but that's when I started learning about older cards and going to card shows. There weren't many card shows like in 1973, but there were a couple of big ones in Manhattan, and we would drive in from Long Island, and I had like a little bit of birthday money. And everyone was like a collector. It wasn't so much like short-term cash guys. That came maybe like by 1980, 81, where the shows changed. People were dealers. They weren't collectors.
All right. So again, people can follow you on Twitter, Split Season 1981. Of course, check the website, Jeff-Katz. Appreciate joining us and, you know, sharing these great stories. Check out the books. And again, and your blog is, you know, you continually write about it. So check out the blog as well. So, Your Honor, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. It was great to be here. Appreciate it.